Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the panel session on the built environment and green living areas as resilience and adaptation approach to climate change in cities. This session is organized by the Euro-Mediterranean Economic Association, an independent think tank from Barcelona, from Spain. And this is a side event of the COP28. We are all here online, but we have our colleagues from EMEA in Dubai in person. So I'd like to give the floor to Professor Rim Ayadi, founder and president of the Euro-Mediterranean Economic Association, and to my colleague, Sarah Ronco. Sarah, Rim. Hello.
Let me first welcome you all to this side event on this very important topic, which is the built environment and green living areas as a key resilient for adaptation, also in mitigation approaches for climate change. I think this is important to highlight. And I would like to give quickly the floor to Sarah here with me to say a few words.
Yes, thank you very much, Joanna, for starting this very important panel. And we are here, as you said, in Dubai. We are hosted in this fantastic office, which has been built in the Mediterranean Coalition, which is actually a coalition of different institutes and think tanks operating in the Mediterranean area. And we are also happy to share so fast here today with our partner that will be also panelists during this meeting, which is Alejandro Lafarga here with us from Interreg Next program. So just a few words. We are very happy to have the possibility to exchange of this important and urbanization are key strategy for building overall climate change adaptation and mitigation. And indeed, we are now dealing in the topic in a day which is actually focusing on multi-level action, urbanization, and built environment transportation system here at COP. So negotiation and table discussion are ongoing just now while we are talking here at the COP28 in Dubai. So we are very happy to have the possibility to exchange on this through the experience of this important and expertise panel that we have here today. So I give you the floor to Joanna to continue the moderation of the panel. Thank you very much to all.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you, Rim. Coming back to our session, Euro-Mediterranean Economic Association is a partner of Green Living Area Mission, a European project that is financed by Interreg Euromed program. The mission objective is to improve citizens' lives by promoting and supporting the transformation of Mediterranean territories into resilient green living areas. But what green living areas are about? I think that we can say that this is a concept related to activities of local authorities, local communities, that are putting sustainable and innovative solutions into practice to improve their life quality and in the same time build resilience against climate change. Thanks to the implementation of various tools in recent years, cities and its local governments have become leaders in the fight against climate change and play an essential role in accelerating the ecological transition. So as today we have with us architects, urban planners, managers, I would like to ask you to share with us your experience, your insights, and on advancing and facilitating and implementing the green transition in cities from your different perspective. And with that, I'd like to present our panelists, our speakers. We have with us Upali Nanda. Upali is Global Practice Director and Research Partner at HKS. Upali, she's a design researcher, architect, and teacher with extensive experience in leading projects focused on impact of design in human health and perception. Thank you very much, Upali, for being with us today. Our second speaker is Judith Cazas. Judith is project officer from the Interreg Euromed program. And Judith oversees the Green Living Area mission for the program. So she will tell us a little bit later about that mission. Esteban Leon is the head of City Resilience Global Program of United Nations Habitat. Esteban has more than 2 decades of experience in building local capacities, designing and managing shelters, housing, and settlement programs, and also building urban resilience. Julie Hiromoto. Julie is Director of Integration Principal at HKS. Her design, technical, and management experience excels in delivering complex and large-scale projects. Our next speaker, Amaia Celaya. She's an urban and climate resilience expert. In her work, Amaia focuses on resilience models, risk management procedures, and climate adaptive actions. Amaia works for International Organization for Migration and also for Inspire Plus consortiums. We have with us Shiba Rose. She was a Global Practice Director, Cities and Communities, and a partner at HKS. And Shiba's focus is master planning, designing development, and schematic design. And our last panelist, but not the least, of course, Alexandro Lafarga. Alexandro is a program officer for the Interreg NextMed program. And Alexandro has a large experience in monitoring the implementation of 80 Mediterranean cooperation projects. So let's start with our first speaker, with Judith Cazas. Judith, can you tell us a little bit more about the Interreg Euromed program, about the Green Living Area mission, about the importance of capitalization among the Interreg program community?
Yes, with pleasure. Can you confirm you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the kind invitation and giving me the opportunity to present the program. I will try to be quite short because to leave some room for the content of expert talks. Because as a program, Interreg Euromed program, our goal is to offer a frame for the stakeholders. This program is a transnational cooperation program set up by the European Union. It aims at supporting Euro-Mediterranean stakeholders in setting up projects from studies to pilot tests, and therefore provides co-financing up to 80% for projects that last 2 to 3 years. But not only. Indeed, after years of quite successful implementations, checking the result, it occurs actually that a key issue was capitalization and transfer of good practices, and on the issues that are actually common to the whole Med territory. So some changes have been decided to improve the efficiency of the program, to first allow partners to propose some more ambitious and, let's say, accurate projects, but also to provide a frame for cooperation and capitalization. So the first change was to enlarge the scope of action with a new mission you introduced called Green Living Areas. Basically, the idea is to bring a territorial and transversal approach to tackle mitigation and adaptation issues linked to the built environment. The second change provided in this new programming period is to ask partners to set up 2 projects called governance projects to actually create, ease, animate cooperation and dialogues between the projects that are financed, and also to support best practice transfers, because actually what projects that were financed. Yes, can you hear me?
No, yeah, we can hear you well now.
Okay. I don't know where it stopped. So
I think that you continue. We just lost 2 words from your speech.
Okay. So I was talking about the governance projects that are here to support the cooperation, the dialogues between projects, and support best practice transfer. And the last change, but not least, is that the program is now setting up an academy, a Euromed Academy, to actually gather together all the trainings built in all projects that will be developed. So the idea is really to have a library of all the projects and really be able to capitalize and transfer all the knowledge made in the program, not to be one-shot finance program. That's it on my side.
Okay, thank you very much, Judith, for explaining to us that new innovative structure of this Interreg program. We hope that the results that we will obtain will be very useful for the future. So thank you once again. And now I'd like to ask Upali to explain to us, to talk to us from her perspective about how the green living areas and cities can promote brain health and flourishing economy. Upali, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. Can you let me share screen? I think it needs you to stop sharing. And thank you again for having us here. Very, very honored to be here and such a critical topic. So thank you for bringing this to the forefront. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Perfect. So this prompt itself is so powerful. How can green living areas and cities promote brain health and a flourishing economy? And partly it's powerful because of the link between the 3: green living, brain health, and economy. Like that's the intersection that is so powerful. This feels really simple, but one of the facts of our life is our brains are housed in our bodies, and our bodies are always somewhere. We are always somewhere. And that somewhere is the environment, and it shapes our experiences. We know that intuitively. We've evolved with it, but perhaps that's also the reason that we take it for granted. We take for granted the power of the environment, what it can do for us. Our environment changes our bodies physiologically. It changes our brains physiologically, and there is more and more compelling evidence about this. We can take simple things like healthy materials and the impact that they have on environmental health, which then has a direct impact on human health. There's recent work that shows that air quality not only affects air pollution, but has a direct, measurable impact on cognitive health. So where we are has a direct impact on our bodies and our brains. and the greening of our environments, healthy air, healthy water, healthy environments are actually physiologically good for us. They're psychologically good for us. And one of the reasons often this gets forgotten is that the conversation about sustainability and green living and the conversation about human health and societal health sometimes happens in two different silos. This conversation to shift the society that we have from egocentric to ecocentric, to really shift from human-centered to living-centered ways of thinking, we have to start anchoring on the art and science of being human. So one of the approaches we have taken to green living has really been through understanding what it is to be human and be in a living system. And that means we really understand the relationship of people with their environments through biological, psychological, and cultural perspectives. So bringing in neuroscience, psychology, and anthropology into the conversation about sustainability and environmental resilience. For us, human resilience and environmental resilience are inseparable. And this is also very powerful because in many ways, the brain is the fundamental building block through which we make sense of our world. So the intersection of the brain and the environment, the human and the environment, society and the environment becomes really, really important. This is why for us, this idea of the brain capital is so transformative, because we start seeing that as a means to make change in our environment. Green living areas, if you think about it that way, are really foundational to economies and societies in a nested scale. You can start from the brain to the body, to groups of people and communities, to the cities that actually house them, to the planet that supports it. And these are nested scales. They are not separable in any conversation, in any design. And so when you are doing design, when you are looking, I mean, this is a section from a recent project, and you look at all of the components of it, from natural ventilation systems to indoor air quality, to what the gray water system is, to how mindful the materials are, because you're looking at the impact it would have, not just on the environment, but also on the human health, and intersecting those. And we will give you one example in this very, very tiny conversation, that this outcome, this link between design to outcome, can be measured in regular day-to-day capital projects. So this is an example of a project we did in UC San Diego. It was a Live Learn Lab. It's an AIA Code 10 project. There was an 81% reduction in measured energy use intensity, which by itself from a sustainability measure is very powerful. But what was also done in the design, because of the way we were looking at how humans come together, is there was increased in social behaviors. There was an 8.2% reduction in student-reported depression. There was an overall increase in student satisfaction. And all of this was while providing more affordable housing for students. So the affordability is an economic driver. Energy use is very much a sustainability driver. Social behaviors, healthy behaviors, using something like point of decision design to make the healthy choice the easy choice. These are all about human health, and they all intersect to create outcomes. And that's, I think, where we are so invested in the role of design in creating better outcomes, where you can look at brain health in the workplace, for example. You can look at enriched environments, how the environment can get new connections going in the brain for neurogenesis, for senior living. You can look at communities where you really design for the community to build resilience. And we also have a resilience design toolkit, which is all about looking at resilience at multiple scales, where you start with the human, because that's the most powerful tool we have. in a vision of the world as we have it right now, we imagine that as technology booms, the human brain and the building brain will be able to speak and respond to each other in a way that is restorative and regenerative of our planet and society. We have to have this conversation now with the third element of technology and really bring it all together towards this flourishing economy. And that's where I would like to end as a prompt, that green living truly is thriving. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Upali, for highlighting the value and the power of the environment in the building areas, which is very often forgotten. And thank you very much for highlighting the value of the brain health in related to the built environment. Let's ask now Esteban. Esteban, how can cities enhance resilience and sustainable development? Can you share with us your experience about the city global resilience program?
Thank you, Joanna. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. First of all, many thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's great to see all of you and discuss these important issues. Upali's presentation was fantastic. Congratulations. I really liked it. I will pass my 5 minutes to her if I could. I think that she really nailed it. It comes all about individuals, right? And about society and people and communities. 5 minutes is very little for me. It's very short time. I'm Latin American, so come on. I usually take longer, but I'm going to try to be concise. Well, I mean, first, Upali gave a really good introduction to the resilience part. I do think that we have to start thinking as well on the new challenges. And as you mentioned, you know, I mean, urbanization and resilience and sustainable development are evolving and are dynamic issues, and we should plan accordingly, right? From the City Resilience Global Program, what we have done is we took the approach of a multi-hazard, because we do believe that, and it's not a believing only, it's facts. In the last 30 years, we have so many increasing challenges, not only population growth and unplanned urbanization, but also the fact that we are seeing more and more frequent, not only natural disasters, but also conflicts. So, I mean, we have to think in that. It's a dynamic model, let's say, that we have in the development of our urbanization, but also on our sustainable development. And it has to do quite a lot with economies as well, and consumptions and all that part. But I'm not going to touch that part. So multi-hazards, definitely. Multi-stakeholders, just because Upali gave a perfect presentation on that. I mean, if we don't involve everyone, if we are not all drivers of building our resilience, this is not going to succeed, right? Joanna, please tell me when it's over my time, because I'm really bad at keeping time on that.
Okay.
And the other is a multi-sectoral approach, and I think that you are doing quite well on that aspect as well. You know, I mean, trying to make sure that we are all involved and all parts are involved in the development. What's interesting, and I can go quite long on this one, is when did we change sustainable development and have to incorporate resilience? That's an interesting question, right? Because I mean, sustainable development should incorporate resilience, but at some point in the 90s, and you gave me up here by saying that I have 2 decades of experience. I don't want to say my age, but it's true. When I started working on these issues, it was the 90s, and it was the decade for natural disasters. I don't know if you remember. In Latin America, it started quite strongly. It was called the International Decade for Natural Disasters. That transformed in 2000 to the UN ISDR, or the Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction. But the idea was to emphasize the fact that we do have more and more natural disasters, and that we have to start working clearly on that. So I will say it's difficult to differentiate sustainable development from resilience building, because it should be incorporated. It should be there. But in any case, we try to mainstream and make sure that people realizes that, you know, we are a dynamic world and things are changing, and we have to take the consideration of these aspects. But when you are planning, you are for sure looking at how to reduce risks and vulnerabilities. I mean, that's part of the planning, right? So what we try to do in the program, in the City Resilience Global Program, is to take all those aspects in consideration and try to support local authorities, because they are the first line of response. Try to support local authorities in planning better, and especially in you know, I mean, because the reality is that when you have such a massive urbanization process, you also have capacities overwhelmed. And probably in developed countries, you have much more control, but in developing countries, it is quite difficult to follow up when you have so many other priorities, right? So the idea is to support them and making sure that they take informed decisions. And what's that? Informed decisions means that they are not based on nothing, but they are based on data and information. That they can collect some important data. They can be well informed before they take decisions on any that has to do with development and planning of their urban areas. And well, I mean, UN Habitat, since we are the agency for cities, we have the mandate and obligation and responsibility of supporting these cities in the development part. And I think that that's the premise that we have, not only as a program, as a City Resilience Global Program, but also as a UN Habitat agency. My last point is, I think that it's very important to also differentiate what is urban from rural planning. These are two different things, and should be approached from a different perspective. It is very important because, you know, when you start planning, you have to consider those aspects that are relevant for each of the contexts. And finally, just a reflection. I think that it's quite interesting how we coming from, I mean, we developed and we started building some infrastructure, and now we realize that infrastructure is dangerous and could create vulnerabilities. I mean, it's how ironic is that, right? Because we come from natural base and went into a very artificial kind of world, and now we want to go back to the natural base, because we were safer before than we are now. And cities were safer before than they are now. So I think that that's an interesting reflection for us. I wouldn't say that we have to emphasize too much in, I mean, I like the idea of the green living, but going back to the past and trying to learn on how to develop better, that will be another premise for building resilience in urban areas. Thank you. I think that I took more of my time. No, it's fine. No? I'm okay.
Yeah, it's fine. And thank you very much, Esteban. I know that 5 minutes not enough to talk about that, but it's like a short introduction. And I think that if I could resume your presentation, I would say that the key word is adaptation and cooperation. This is my take from your talk. So thank you once again. Julie, could you share with us from your perspective, how can we revitalize communities through a well-designed built environment?
Yes, thank you, Joanna, for including us. And Esteban, I just want to say, yes, +1. I think a multi-sectored approach and the power of local partners is critical to revitalizing communities and executing on well-designed built environments. And I'd like to talk a little bit about an integrated transdisciplinary approach that's key to this. And my role as the director of integration is somewhat unique for a design firm. As HKS's director of integration, I help connect dots, transfer knowledge, and build partners for integrative and intentional approaches to regenerative design, to brain capital, to a world where all of humanity can flourish. So what does that look like? Internally, we're transferring knowledge and insights from different parts of different types of building typologies, like how in healthcare environments we design with a really hyper focus on patient outcomes. And how can we translate that mindset to learning environments and the schools that we're designing and building? The hospitality industry is very focused on the guest experience. And how might this be applied to clinical healthcare settings for better patient outcomes? Externally, also, I'm helping us to build relationships and identify the right partners for strategic collaboration and coalition building so that collectively we can accelerate and amplify progress on our shared climate, equity, and economic goals. So as part of this externally facing work, I just tuned in a few hours ago to the Global ABC, the Alliance for Building and Construction's announcement on the Buildings Breakthrough Agenda as a virtual COP28 delegate for Architecture 2030. And on Friday, the first ever local climate action summit integrated into the COP program invited, finally, local leaders to the table. And many people were saying that it took too long to get them there. So I just want to echo your point about those local partners, Esteban. I also serve as the mayor's appointee to the Dallas, Texas's first environmental commission. And we're responsible for advising the city council on the implementation of our first comprehensive environmental climate action plan, which was unanimously passed in 2020. And environmental justice underpins each of the 8 goals: buildings, renewable energy, access to convenient transit, zero waste and circularity, water, natural ecosystems, which includes access to parks and green spaces, trees and shade, access to healthy food, and air quality. The strength of the Dallas Climate Action Plan lies in the way that it positions this important work in a very business-friendly state. It contextualizes the heat, the drought, the flooding, the public health challenges that Dallas residents, business owners, and leaders have experienced themselves by explaining how climate change translates to lost business opportunities, to increased costs of infrastructure and public services, risks to long-term regional growth. You know, Dallas and Texas are some of the fastest growing areas in the United States, and to environmental justice. And the plan frames climate action in ways that matter most to the residents, really inspiring them to act.
Thank you very much, Julie, for your insights and for highlighting the value of action climate plans that are developed by cities as to incorporate the changes at the local level, changes that have to be followed by local communities. Amaia. Hello, Amaia. Thank you very much for being with us. As we have talked before the session about your work, you mentioned that you were working on projects where incorporating the just green transition concept. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, first of all, thanks again for the invitation. And yes, to answer to your question, the crucial word here is just, so a fair transition, because almost all of us understand the problem we are immersed in and the starting point. Almost all of us guess about what the goal is, this horizon we desperately need to reach in a very, very short time. But what's going to happen in the meanwhile? Sorry?
No, I think that we just have some interference.
Just noise.
Please continue.
So I will focus in the meanwhile. So what's happening while this transition from exclusive to inclusive, from gray to green, are in progress? Because we are provoking here a systemic change, a structural one. So these changes must be affordable for all, performed in a democratic way, and with open access for everyone. So we have a kind of limited margin of action that it's between the outside edge of no harming, neither the planet nor the people, and the edge inside that is not leaving anyone behind. And it comes with a quite humanitarian, strong, rational link to protection of vulnerable people and vulnerable regions, because what about poverty levels in carbon-intense regions that are the ones that are going to suffer the hardest changes? What about these people that are at risk, that are in vulnerable situations, the elderly, etc.? So how are we going to make it fair? So according to ECNO, the European Climate Neutrality Observatory, there are 3 enablers that I like it a lot, because I have been also working with the European Urban Initiative in, in a Romanian project that somehow follows this rationale, these enablers. So how to make it? Green jobs out of the biomass derived from bio-based business model and services, of course, related to mobility and energy renewable schemes, along trainings and coaching programs, of course. So green jobs, territories. When it comes to the scope, it must be territorial. So we need a territorial just transition, and with transition funds that in Europe we already have. So plans and funds for transitions. And of course, the third enabler is targeting people in vulnerable situations. Support to households when it comes to energy poverty, to mobility, and I would add also when it comes to health. So we can see the strategies come with a triple bottom line. We are focusing on prosperity with the green jobs. We are focusing on planet with this territorial scope, and we are focusing on people, addressing the risk that comes potentially if we leave these people and these territories behind while we are performing this green transition. And just to finish, and considering all the worries about the means, primarily budgetary, that we need for the green transition, just a couple of figures. So according to the European Fiscal Observatory in 2022, 500 European billionaires had 2.4 trillion euros. This is double the Spanish GDP. In jurisdictions in which they barely pay taxes, we are talking about 0.125% on average for their fortune. Again, in 2022, fossil subsidies reached a record in the European Union with 123 billion euros. And I will not enter the numbers about military expenses. So just to remind, because most of you are very, very young, luckily, that the European youth organizations pointed out that we need public money to finance our future, not to destroy it. And with this, I finish. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Amaia. Indeed, the green transition can be successful only if we, if all the society will be taken into account. So we really have to keep in mind not leaving anybody behind. With that, I'd like to ask Shiba about how can thoughtful design strategies influence the way people engage with each other.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be at this table where, interestingly enough, while we are all each so different, we are so intricately connected by our common purpose. And that's actually a very simple way, Joanna, of answering your question about how thoughtful design strategies could influence the way people engage with each other. I'm Shiba Ross. I get to serve as the Global Practice Director in the Cities and Communities practice at HKS. I started as an architect. I graduated from architecture and worked as an architect in India before coming to the US to pursue urban design and urban planning. And in this role as a practice director for cities and communities, I get to do urban design and urban planning, but both through immersive engagement and geospatial analytics. So a very simple way by which I'd like to communicate where that interest rests is actually through this particular saying. Follow me through this. We put 30 spokes together and call it a wheel, but it is on the space where there is nothing that the usefulness of the wheels depends. We turn clay to make a vessel, but it is on the space where there is nothing that the usefulness of the vessel depends. We pierce doors and windows to make a house, and it is on these spaces where there is nothing that the usefulness of the house depends. Therefore, just as we take advantage of what is, we should recognize the usefulness of what is not. And it is the what is not that actually leverages urban design and urban planning. So if I want to connect the pieces of where we are in the conversation, I would say that our work starts with understanding the presence of a particular project in its greater context. We might be looking at that single acre site. It could be a transit-oriented development where we want to engage with people. But we need to zoom out. We need to understand the nature of the larger place, the communities at play, the health of the environment, but also the health of the people in order to actually respond meaningfully in a humanized way. And what that does is that it causes a shift. And the shift is that while we are fundamentally committing to principles, we are shifting to a central purpose. And this purpose, as we design our master planning projects, as we look at transit-oriented developments, at downtown master plans, at water fronts where resiliency is key, we are listening to people, place, and planet. And what that allows us to do, it allows us to tap into the power of design across a continuum. That today we might be actually tasked with actually designing the lobby of an office building, but we can understand that that lobby can serve as an outdoor room for its community, which means every design stroke at that particular small space has the power to influence all the way to the city. We are creating spaces that will help the community see themselves in the bigger picture. So here is an example of what that could mean in terms of design strokes. What I'm showing you is a transit-oriented development project in Atlanta, Georgia, but this is something that can be translated anywhere. What I mean by that is understanding that our design strategies have to reflect the DNA of the community. It means we can't have blanket policies. We can't have just overarching best practices that could be the same that is applied in a corner in California or in a rural area in India. No, right? We have to be contextually rooted. And what that allows us to do is that it allows us to create a sense of restoration and rejuvenation and belonging in that place. So what you see here, whether it's preserving or creating a park, a plaza, or a terrace where we convene people, is very, very deeply representing the DNA of that particular community, so that we understand what it means to create a destination. What does it mean to restore? How do you elevate the well-being in a way that actually extracts and represents the legacy of a community? So the shift in order to create this thoughtful design spaces that meets people where they are means that we actually create a co-creative process. And what that looks like is that we represent the community from being a consumer to a contributor. You're seeing an engagement in this particular project where we are actually co-creating with the community, because who are we just by ourselves to imagine what it is that the community needs? This is where our leader, who you're seeing up there, is a city council member. It's those who are invested in the next generation. It's those who might actually be even visually impaired, but they want to be represented, but also chart the path for this particular, for their own community. So which means that piece by piece, a thoughtfully designed project actually, it's like a puzzle that is put together that represents the DNA of the community. This is something that we co-created with the community because each one has a different view. And that brings me to this idea of a shift in ROI. Master planning that is focused on resilience, master planning that is focused on building community is not just thinking about ROI in terms of dollars, it's thinking about ROI in terms of impact on our well-being, creating a sense of belonging so that what we do today not only stands the test of time, but also helps the community to see a piece of themselves in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shiva, for sharing with us all those very inspirational projects. I think that co-creation is the word, and that really the green living areas can be created without participation of the final users, without the participation of the local communities in the creation process. So thank you very much for sharing your perspective.
Thank you.
Alejandro, you are a project officer of the NextMed Interreg program. This is like a parallel program to the Interreg Euromed, which was presented by Judith. Can you tell us from your perspective about how the Interreg NextMed program is contributing to the green transition?
Sure. Well, thanks for inviting us here today. I'm glad to be also in a panel with experts on urban and environment in the US. So I mean, this is new for us, and I think that it's also great to tell what we do and to people of other countries. So first of all, we'll just tell who I am and what we do. So Interreg NextMed is a program funded by the European Union, which is funding cooperation projects among the neighbors in the Mediterranean of the EU. This program, we have funded 80 projects in the past years, and they are all now finishing. And of course, all the projects that we funded with a total value that was about 200 million. Of course, environment and sustainability was at the center of our policies. Among these 80 projects, and if we go to the urban and environments, one of our main pillars was the energy efficiency in buildings. We know that buildings are responsible for around the 40% of the CO2 emissions in the world, and And so one of the priorities of our program was this thing. So at the end, in the different call for proposals, we founded 8 projects that were directly addressing this topic. These projects were doing several actions, but some of them was, of course, energy efficiency in the buildings and doing some energy renovations. Other projects also included installing renewables in the buildings or in the parks or even in the universities. We selected different projects that were also addressing different urban settings. So some of them were even in the university campuses. So and some of them were just in the streets or in the schools. But of course, all the actions included awareness raising, especially with the children, and even installing some devices and some equipment that could allow these buildings to either generate energy or to save its consumption. Apart from it, and apart from this 8 project that, by the way, we were happy to be selected by the EU Sustainable Energy Week to present them in Brussels, and we were in a panel with the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction, the Global ABC, with whom we could exchange and present our results. Apart from that, other projects that were addressing different priorities were also somehow related to the urban setting. So we had some projects that were also tackling the reuse of all urban spaces that were abandoned, so giving new uses, but of course in a more sustainable way. But other projects even were addressing the use of green waters in the city, or even the circular economy and adapting spaces to make easier to recycle. So that was the main outcome of those 80 projects that we funded. So that was the past. Now this program is closing, and we are about to launch a new program, a new call, which will be called Interreg Next Med. So we really hope to launch it in a matter of weeks, and we will present 9 priorities, in which, of course, environment and energy will be also at the center. So if anyone wants to somehow work on these projects for the improvement of our urban spaces, there are different ways, because even if I mean, of course, the energy efficiency objective seems like the most adequate one, and the most which is addressing more directly the issues about urban settings. But there are other possibilities, of course, competitiveness of SMEs and research and innovation. In the previous program, we had some projects. For example, we had one that was only addressing one cluster, that was the smart cities. So as there are so many companies and there is really an industry about smart cities, this project was only funding actions of the smart cities sector. But of course, if there are any ideas on research that could improve the way that we live in the cities and how sustainable they are, that will also be eligible for funding. But also there are other priorities that could even do it. Climate change adaptation. Of course, we have to adapt our spaces. We know that the climate change is there, and if you present ideas that could help you to solve it in your space, that will be funded. But access to water or even circular economy, as long as it is on the cities and help us to better relate to the environment, that will work. Even to training, as we know that there is a growing need for skills and training on how to perform renovations and things like this, that could also be eligible. And of course, this new one, which will be governance actions, so projects that could address local authorities, regional, national, but anything that could make that the public authorities could implement better policies in no matter what sector. So of course, urbanism and cities could be there, could be also one action that could be funded. So we are proud to say that our program is quite open for to many sectors. We always allow ideas as long as they address the topic, but you can do something really quite transversal. Of course, at the center must be the cooperation. Our projects always need to have partnerships composed by at least 3-4 partners across Mediterranean countries, and because for us cooperation is at the center of our mission. So if we all manage to make different entities to cooperate across the Mediterranean to address any of these challenges, and of course urbanism is in there in many ways, we'll be more than happy to fund these projects and to see this project being implemented to help make the Mediterranean a better place for us all. So that was all from my side. Thanks for the time, for the attention, and I hope that this was encouraging for letting you know that there are these opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alessandro. Thank you for presenting the priorities of this new NextMed project, and I'm sure that in the future we'll find a lot of synergy and possibilities for collaboration with the Interreg Euromed program. So now I'd like to ask you for a short feedback for my 3 coming questions. So the first question is about the strategies that allow incorporating nature into urban and rural planning, and thus enhancing the resilience. I know that 2 minutes is very, very short time, but just please give me some of your thoughts on reflections. Judith, can we start with you?
Okay. Tricky exercise. I built up my answer on some of the things that have been said previously. I think at some point there's a real need to access the information, and also a need to share the diagnosis, that the state of the art that would be built with the community, bearing in mind we're all experts of the city. There's not the designer who knows and the community who consume or something like that. So I think at some point it has to, keep on going like that, and for cities to really integrate all those issues in some kind of master planning documents, so it can in the end end up in some proper local actions. And I guess at some point we'll have to talk about some sober land use of our territories and communities.
Mm-hmm.
Stop there.
Thank you, Judith.
Wow.
Upali, from your perspective, what it could be?
So first of all, Joanna, I'd say that when we think about human-environment interactions, urban and rural planning has to take a broader definition. There's a big challenge on what happens at the sightline. Who's responsible within the sightline? Who's responsible outside the sightline? We spend 90% of our time indoors. And urban and master planning strategies, rural planning strategies never take into account what's happening inside the building. So that was part of what Shiva, for example, was sharing, is this complete continuum where you really follow the human across different scales. And you don't stop at the wall of the building because so much is happening inside. So that, I think, is the first strategy I would suggest, is let's increase the scope and let's start in those nested scales of how we really think about humans. So interiors starts coming into it, architecture, core and shell, what's happening in the neighborhood planning, what's happening in the city planning, those are all one design problem. And I would posit that one of our challenges is that we have divided this very simple thing of designing human habitat into all these super specialized professions. So when Esteban was talking about going back, like why is it so complicated? How is one different person responsible for the building system? Somebody else is doing the interior, someone else is doing the city planning, someone else is doing the neighborhood planning. We fragmented our habitat. If we have a holistic definition of habitat, then we really start making that transformation happen. So that would be my one thing, to incorporate nature. Let us think about habitat in natural ways. And I saw Shiva on mute, so maybe we can go off sequence and have her add to this.
I was just thinking, Upali, that a tactical way of doing that is just like how we transcend our professions and interact. You know, another way is for the green spaces that we actually prescribe to be multifunctional. To think about what if a park could serve as, as a stormwater retention, right? It becomes this canvas for play. It becomes where small businesses thrive. It becomes where, when you can't stay indoors because there is a pandemic, that you can be together, but also alone. So master plans that create a flexible framework, that doesn't confine where particular uses have to go, but allow spaces to function, across different purposes, across different uses, could actually be very beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Shiva. What's your point about that, Esteban?
Well, it's a bit unfair to talk after Upali and Shiva because they mentioned really good points here. But I will go back to what I say at some point. I mean, we have to consider that urban planning and rural planning are different, right? So if we start from that, I think that we have to look at some specific areas where we could add some value into this transformation. One is renaturalization of water channels, for example. That crosses urban areas. We all know that water is one of the issues and will be one of the issues that will be, a potential conflict in future. Restructuring infrastructure, for example, through natural-based solutions. There could be another measure that we should start emphasizing. Enhancing infiltration of ratio in public space, for example, is important. Most of the flooding situations happen because we are not considering those aspects in most of the cases. From the rural areas, I can't talk much because I haven't been working a lot on rural areas. But I will say that we have to emphasize, let's say, the agricultural techniques that respect natural environments. That could be one of the issues. The other part that I think it's important is that, as mentioned before, economics play a really important part of all this. So we have to show what the value is for this, because otherwise we are going to keep hitting our head against the wall, right? When that doesn't happen, when they don't see the value in economic terms, is when these problems happen. And it's very difficult, I agree. I mean, it's challenging to show how the economic value of going back to natural solutions is. But I think that it's now our turn to try to push towards that and try to recover what we lost, let's say, and going back to the past in so many terms. I think it's important. I do believe, to be a bit positive, sorry, I don't know if I passed my time, but I do believe that you know, I mean, we went through the transition, right, from very rural to urban. I'm talking about humanity, human history, and at some point we were very crazy about modernization and new buildings and beautiful, you know, infrastructure. And I do think that now we are going through a new phase, which is has much more to do with artificial intelligence, with you know, new solutions that don't have to do so much with infrastructure, hard infrastructure. So I do think that we have an opportunity here to try to cross that path and make sure that, you know, I mean, especially young people now, they are not so interested so much in having a beautiful building in front of them. They are more interested in knowing what's inside systems. So I do believe that this is a chance for us to change that path. Especially in developed countries, they already arrived to a point in which they have a comfortable life, which is not the same in developing countries. So let's try to make sure that developing countries develop in a way that it's natural friendly. And I think that will be the perfect balance for all of us. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. This is a big challenge to being natural friendly. Don't forget about that. Thank you, Esteban. Amaia, would you like to add something to that?
Well, I bring to the table an concrete example. I have been working for 3 years in a project called SPIRE, Smart Post-Industrial Regenerative Ecosystem in Romania. This project is based on the magical ability of plants to extract, to stabilize and volatilize heavy metals from the soil. So we are using willows that I don't know if you know, but it's also the tree where we extract the aspirin. So it's a tree that heals people and heals also the planet. I don't think we can come back to the past, but I do believe that we have to use the past and traditions, and we have to build upon them to build a new future. And this project is an example of it. And beyond that, is cost effective and not only mitigate or it's adapted to climate emergency, but it's reverting the harm we have done to the soil. So we are in a city heavily contaminated by heavy metals, and we are really healing. We are cleaning the soil, yes, with plants, with willows in this case. And of course, it comes with healing the soil, healing the people, because the public health schemes in the city are quite worrying. And we have a new green infrastructure. You were talking about regenerative architecture or agriculture, new economic schemes based on the biomass that we are extracting from these willows. And yeah, for me, this is one nice example of how to incorporate nature in this case in urban fabric. Also, I have another example in Ecuador, working with the International Organization for Migration. We receive a lot of Venezuelan migrants there, and they go to cities. Cities in Ecuador usually lack green spaces. So here, these nature-based solutions go hand in hand with risk reduction strategies. I don't know if you have heard about the El Niño phenomena, for example. So we are using, or we are proposing these nature spaces, these nature-based solutions that are not only green, are also blue, to fight and to face this phenomena. And we work with nature-based solution and risk reduction strategies going for a climate adaptive new scenario.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Maya, for your thoughts. Julie, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, just very quickly, I have two examples I'd like to share. I was in Singapore last month for the Council of Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat annual conference. And they're doing some amazing work with policy. You know, it's a very dense place, but it's also very lush and very livable. And they have a policy in Singapore where if you remove an existing tree, you have to plant 3 more in its place. So it's really addressing the economics of time and what we lose when we take away the nature that we have. The Singapore BCA, the Building and Construction Authority, and the National University of Singapore, and partners in the private sector are also developing design strategies and piloting low technology building systems that inform the building code. So really taking this idea of natural ventilation and developing hybrid cooling strategies where you reduce the thermostat set point to about 80, 81 degrees Fahrenheit, and then use ceiling fans, so very low energy, to move air around to enhance thermal comfort. They've been able to reduce their energy use intensity by 80% with these strategies, and they're not even touching the building envelope. So very cost effective, very simple technology, and it's not that, and very comfortable, even in this hot and humid climate. The point I'm trying to make here is that the design and technology solutions exist. We have them out there. We have the analytical tools to prove and verify that they will work. But what we really need is the willpower and the appetite for experimentation that will allow us to deviate from business as usual and the status quo and the known predictable knowns, because this can't be an acceptable solution given where we are today and the change that we need to so rapidly achieve.
Thank you, Julie. I think that is important to put numbers, figures on what we are going to achieve, and just to be conscious what it can be in the future, like a big apportation to our new future. Alejandro, could you add something?
Well, I guess that if I have to add something, that might be something Mediterranean, because I'm representing a Mediterranean program. I would say that we have to embrace our Mediterranean way of living the cities, in the way that our city centers are the places where there's the history, there is our heritage. There are many heritage buildings that must be valorized, but at the same time, we have to adapt them to the new uses that we want to do. And that's what many projects, but also many programs are doing, because they have to focus on use our centers, and I think that we are on the good track for this. You know that here in Europe we got this concept of a 15-minute city, where you can reach everything in a 15-minute walk, and I think that's great. I mean, we go to other continents, and we see that not always is it that way. That on the street there is life, there is people, there is everything you need. There are shops, and that's been great. And so I think that we will continue supporting these kind of policies, and I will end up just remembering that we are now in Dubai. So it's a city, or it's a state that has been entirely developed in the last 20 years. So you might think that they might have taken some of the new urban concepts, like having everything in a walking distance, but not at all. We've seen that it's a city where you need the car for living here. So it's a pity that we know also that that petrol is not a problem for them. But in any case, at the Mediterranean level, our spaces and our cities, we are proud of them, and we will continue supporting them, are redesigning them in the coming years.
Thank you, Alejandro. You have just mentioned Dubai, like a new city, new development city. I'd like to ask you about your reflection, your thoughts about how to ensure that the new developments in cities are environmentally sustainable and resilient to climate change. Because if you are talking about Europe, we know that we are working a lot with regeneration, reuse of existing buildings. But what about the new developments? Esteban, can we start with you?
Thank you. Well, I think that Alejandro in his last part made a really good point. I think that ensuring that development exactly is part of filling up the existing urban environment with a medium to high density of people and promote mixed uses of urban spaces. I think that that's very important. I think that if we make sure that we don't depend on a car to move, that will also support the environment. The other point is I think that planning those medium to high densities in cities in future are something that we can emphasize in these 15-minute cities, as was saying Alejandro. But also, I think that it's important to avoid the unnecessary development based on only in economic speculation, right? And which is happening in many places. I mean, now they are selling quite a lot of new housing in some places because it's basically speculation on prices. And I think that's important to consider when we develop new areas in cities, to make sure that we don't go for the larger spaces, but more public spaces, which is needed. I mean, the criteria of maintaining the compact areas is important, and foster livelihoods in public spaces. You know, it's another point that I think it's highly recommendable, let's say, and also foster co-living and social mixture in future developments. I think that we have, you know, I think that we have many opportunities as well to show good cases in which, you know, by living closer together, we are reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also we are in a transition to have a more healthy way of living. I mean, I had the opportunity to live in many places, and it's true that it's very contextual. But the reality is that we live in only one big world, and everything is interconnected, and everything impacts the other. So I think that's another thing that we have to think. It's not about Europe only, or not about North America or South America. It's about one world. So whatever we do here has an impact, and we could see this with the latest conflicts, right? Now the prices are going high everywhere in the world, and that shows you. I mean, what more evidence do we want to show that you know, a local impact could have, or a local conflict could have a global impact? And COVID was another example. Climate change is another example. I mean, we have so many examples now that we should start learning rather than just collecting lessons. Thank you.
Thank you, Esteban. Shiva, what are your thoughts?
I think the only other piece that I was thinking of is building partnerships. Because I think, just like Upali was sharing, sometimes when we see, for example, that we need to build a hospital, if we only think about the hospital organization and forget that maybe at a ground floor level, it could be beyond just, you know, in terms of responding to acute care, but maybe responding to preventive care and well-being. That kind of synergic thinking is going to help us actually naturally move towards resilience. So, and if, for example, if we think about housing, rather than just thinking about what does the market demand say, and where again the ROI could be in dollars, maybe not just making it accessible, but also attainable. So housing that is inclusive, that is diverse, that can be attained are all just small steps by which you actually create that blueprint for sustainability.
Okay, thank you, Shiva. Actually, what you have been talking about, Esteban, Shiva, it's a holistic vision that we should have while we are trying to construct a new environment, a holistic vision, because we have to look at our society like a organism where everything is connected. I don't know who is left. Maybe Judith, would you like to add something on that subject? What are your thoughts?
Not much to add. Maybe cost effectiveness, I guess, at some points mean anticipation. And maybe also somehow reversibility of what we could put even what could be implemented in the city, because we don't know where all this is really leading, and we talk about necessary of multifunctionality, and all this is also changing quickly. We saw some crises like COVID showing some new expectation, new needs. So yes, that's what I would add quickly.
Okay.
And beyond the cost effectiveness, I wouldn't forget the socially equitable part of the game.
Yeah, thank you, Maya, for mentioning that.
Because it's not only about being cost effective, and I already mentioned some figures, so we can make it. It's not about budget, but even though we are trying to have some cost-effective solutions, as these phytoremediation solutions that are much more cheap, even if they need more time to clean the soil than the previous physical remediation methods, just as an example. But we need really to make it for everybody. And it comes with participatory processes, with co-production products, with governance schemes that allow us to decide together where do you want to go, and without forgetting these needs of, and I come back to my first answer, this need of prosperity for all. I just as an example in South Sudan, the need in the city, there are green areas, of course. But the way of making it really count is proposing green jobs, because people really, after a conflict, need a livelihood, and counting on these green areas to propose the so-called bio-based new jobs is something that is not so difficult. You have to think about that, and it's quite feasible, and can come with these social equitable schemes. Thanks.
Thank you, Maya. And here comes my last question, which is about what we have already talked about, because it's about the importance of the community engagement in the planning, maintenance of the green living areas. I mean, it's like at the principal point of having a good design, well-functioning green living areas. Can you give us an example of a community drive initiative that contributes to urban rural resilience against climate change? Amaia, can we start with you?
Well, again, I will go for examples, really concrete actions. So I have been involved in a project here in Barcelona, Women Dialogues, working with a small NGO. We are working in a quite complicated neighborhood in El Raval with people, women, immigrant women from Bangladesh, and we were for this. We went for these kind of trainings and the dialogues with them about climate emergency. And the tangible consequences of these trainings have been not only learning about the rationale linked to climate emergency and understanding what are the resources that a city as Barcelona can give to these women, but also really review on-site climate shelters and propose some recommendations to improve public spaces, just from a kind of really a community-based understanding. And second, example in Kurdistan, also near Mosul, after a conflict in ISIS conflict in 2017, there are certain neighborhoods as Nida that are now informal settlements. In this case, we are using nature not so much related with the risk reduction strategies, and in Ecuador, we are using it for environmental issues. And we are focused mainly on sewage networks or waste collection schemes, and we are doing it through several community committees built on purpose for these matters, and they are really working. So we really need to the community own and enjoy and decide about what's going to be their future. Thanks.
Thank you, Amaia. Upali, can we create a green living areas without the participation of the local communities, without the participation of the local users?
No. I mean, what we do is so deeply contextual. It's placed somewhere, right? I think place is where space and people come together. So place by definition is local, and it has to be with local constituents. So to your point, Joanna, it's impossible. Like all of the examples, and I'm sure Shiba is going to speak about concrete examples, are with engagement of the community. One thing that I would go back to in terms of cost benefit in the previous question and social equity that we are talking about comes from community engagement. Like in many ways, if you engage the community, then you can prioritize and you can really have cost benefit. And I don't know when cost became about the bottom line, because cost in its principle is about being effective use of resources. And effective use of resources by definition is what sustainability is all about and what gives you resilience. And if you do an effective use of resources that is responsive to the community you're designing for, you are being equitable. And I think one of the key challenges is that we have these perceptions. And that's why I come back to the brain building city explosion that needs to happen is we have to break perceptions. Cost effective is not a developer trying to get to the bottom line. Cost effective is maximum value with the right use of resources for the stakeholders who are on the table with you. And just our inability to do that, to use what we call a co-benefit framework, where everybody comes to the table and say, what is the co-benefit here? What is that triple bottom line that we're talking about? And that cannot happen if you go top down. That cannot happen for a community without the community. So I feel like sometimes, even when we're giving the prompt, we are assuming that cost is in conflict with equity, and equity is in conflict with good design. Good design, by definition, should be cost effective, should be equitable, should be responsive. Otherwise, it's not good design. And I think we've just lowered the bar for design in many ways. And that's what has created so much complexity right now. We have celebrated the wrong things. And if we just start celebrating good definition with this kind of a definition, that might change. But I will get off my soapbox now.
Thank you very much, Upali, for your insights. Judith, from your perspective as a program officer.
No, I would just to, just on what has been said, sometimes maybe the problem that's all this design are not cost effective. It's because it's not the same who pay for the design and who pay for living there and the maintenance and all those things, and maybe that's also an issue we face. But anyway,
Judith, I do want to think that's a very powerful point, that those who live in the areas are not the ones paying and not the ones deciding, and I think that's a really powerful point. The other powerful point in that is those who are designing don't have accountability to the outcomes. And that's a big shift too, that if you really start being accountable to the lived experience of the communities you're designing for, which can only happen if you're designing in a collective, that's a huge shift. And I think one thing, at least, I feel the European Mediterranean Association is very well equipped to change is economic accountability of all stakeholders in this co-design, co-creating process. It's a tremendous opportunity. Sorry, I just wanted to throw that out there because
I agree. Maybe just to, I think we all agree on that issue of being very inclusive, having all the community working together. Maybe just some challenge I see at some point is that maybe sometimes local authorities, because it's mainly them who will kind of orchestrate all this thing, sometimes are scared of this process. They're scared of being challenged by the same community, citizens, potential electors of them, and also sometimes don't see that as the experience I have, they need some professional to also organize this debate, this community debate, and not just think they organize one meeting, gathering everybody and say, oh, let's talk about the future of your area. And it's also time consuming. It's for the good, but that's first investment. They have some issue to actually bring it at the first place. So if you have also some feedback or experience on how to make that click so that it's actually organized, or it's some budget is put on the table to organize it, I would be interested also.
Thank you, Judith. Yes, indeed. That's the point, how to have the engagement not only of the local communities, but also the engagement of the local authorities, how to make them work together. That's the big question. Esteban, from your perspective.
You are opening a can. I mean, social engagement, definitely. That's. I can give you plenty of examples. I mean, Pakistan, Haiti, Ecuador, the Philippines. So many examples in which, without the work of, without engaging communities and social engagement in general, you can't really process much. What's interesting, and I'm going to try to summarize all the experiences in something very touchy, which is we have done an analysis some years ago on what percentage of the international community is in a post-crisis situation, right? And reality is that large organizations, I mean, I'm not going to name organizations, but large organizations that rush after a crisis and they think that they are the saviors, they don't respond to more than 20% of the crisis. Most of the crisis response is responded by local actors. 85+% of building constructions after a crisis is done by the actors, right? By the same victims of this disaster. We live in a fantasy world where we are waiting for the white savior to come and save us. but that's not reality. Reality is that when they arrive and they come with a little money and try to put something there, you know, the local communities are already reconstructing themselves, and they are already, you know, they are the most resilient part. So I do think that we have to change that mentality of you know, trying to support or be what's the name? Assistalistic, right? Or paternalistic, like, let's call it, and think that we are going and helping these communities by putting a couple of houses there. I think that, you know, at some point I tried to push for doing an impact evaluation of the projects that we have. Our reality is that, you know, if you do an impact evaluation, you will see how insignificant is the impact of our response in most of the crisis situations. So I will say the best and the most impactful responses have been always engaging local actors. And this is something that I've been trying to push quite hard when I was working for the Interreg Standing Committee Humanitarian Affairs. We cannot pretend that we are going there and helping people, you know, without engaging with them. And this was very evident, for example, in the Philippines, where I had to see the mayor, and I had discussions with the mayor, and the mayor was saying to me, I don't understand why, you know, all these people came to help us, but they are sitting in their own tents, doing their own things without involving us. And we are duplicating. So it comes to the point that was raised by Upali, right? I mean, the cost effectiveness is not, it means that we have to maximize resources, and maximizing resources means that all resources, including local resources and local capacities. And believe me, you know, I mean, I saw it so many times happening that, you know, these organizations land, parachute, discuss with the national government. They don't discuss with the local governments. They just do what they are trained to do. They don't think too much. They react. They are very sectoral. They think in their boxes. And then at the end of the day, they leave, and they leave the crisis behind. How many of you have been, you know, I mean, when did you hear last about what's happening in Haiti at the moment? And in 2010, it was huge, right? And now we are hearing what's happening in Gaza. Who hears now what's happening in Ukraine? And what happened in the Philippines in 2012? And what happened in Peru in 2008? Nobody hears that, but these people are still living there. These places are not empty. So if you don't involve local capacities, we are wasting time and we are wasting resources. And it's, as Upali says, cost effectiveness, just to work together, right? So yeah, thank you. I'm sorry for the
Thank you very much, Esteban, for your insight. Shiva, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, I was thinking that we could think of it as, you know, a toolkit that determines like the type, the tool, and the timing. The type could be us first determining, you know, do we want to inform the community, or are we advising? Do we need to involve? Do we collaborate, or do we empower or amplify? And it's important for us to recognize that depending on the who, it'll change. You know, the spectrum, where we are in the spectrum will change. So once we determine the type, then you can actually think about the tools, because we can't use the same tool for every kind of outreach. That would mean that we look at, are we going to gather around a small table? Is this an open house kind of a discussion? Do you create a focus group, a steering committee? Do we actually do an online platform? And all of that is important because the community needs to feel that a sense that you are catering to their particular need. And then the timing of it, you know, like we don't have to do all of it all at once, but use our responsible moment measure to see who we need to engage. And for all of this to happen, we need to actually start with defining the who. Sometimes we use the word community in such a broad manner that it, again, just like some policies, becomes a blanket statement. And sometimes just engaging with the youngest generation could actually set the tone for the future, right? Because it is today's third grader who is going to actually experience the transit-oriented developments that we're working on. So we need to engage across generationally. So just in closing, I would say that a rule of thumb we follow in community engagement is this. Don't do for me without me.
Yeah, very important, I think, because you have just mentioned those different types of actions that can be put into practice. But I think that what should be also taken into account is how to gain the confidence of the local communities, how to, engage them, but by gaining the confidence.
Trust, yeah, it's all about building trust.
Exactly. This is another big challenge, I think. Julie, would you like to share your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think you build trust through transparency and accountability too, right? If people are going to take time off from work, organize childcare, they want to know that their voice is being heard and where it goes. And that doesn't mean that everything that gets suggested gets incorporated into and integrated into the final plan. But how do you respond to that, right? And how do you speak to the community's needs in a way that recognizes, I hear you, I see you, and it activates and mobilizes the population, right? So that we are all doing this together, that it's not happening passively to anyone. And so if we think about, in order to do that, we need a clear vision. We need simple goals that everybody can understand. And then we need clear outcomes that most of the time are measurable so that we can connect back to it and say, okay, here's our progress. Here's where we're, meeting expectations. Here's where we're falling behind. And here's where we need to turn up the volume a little bit, or here's where we can all celebrate together that we've accomplished this together. And it could be something as simple as planting trees, right? Well, yes, planting trees are important for creating, a beautiful space. And we have a tree equity problem in Dallas, for example. But it's not just about beauty and nature in the built environment. It's about creating shade so that people can walk comfortably from one place to another. It's about air quality. And it's also about just the joy of birdsong that, is bringing that kind of natural element and the species biodiversity back into our urban realm so that we can all feel energized by it.
Thank you very much, Julia. Thank you for sharing with us that beautiful thoughts. And with that, we'd like to wrap up the session. Thank you very much for all your insights, sharing your experience, and thank you for very fruitful discussion. I don't know, Rim, Sarah, would you like to add something?
Yes. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, everybody, for this really fascinating discussion. And I want to add one single, I would say, point, building on Shiva. We need to move from consumers to contributors for flourishing lives within our cities, embedded in the environment and the nature. And I think this is all could be a response to all the challenges of the climate change that we're seeing. So with this, thank you very much for the moderation, Joanna from Barcelona. Thank you all. Please stay